Eleanor Whitmore thought her perfectly controlled world of millions and marble towers made her untouchable, until a single moment of financial catastrophe threatened to destroy everything she'd built. What she never expected was salvation to come from the quiet black maintenance worker she'd barely noticed, a man whose gentle wisdom would expose every lie she'd been living. But when their forbidden connection ignites into something deeper than Eleanor ever imagined possible, the price of choosing love over status becomes devastatingly clear. The walls of privilege that protected her will become the very prison that threatens to tear them apart, unless Eleanor finds the courage to risk losing everything for the one thing money can't buy. Some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed, but some loves are worth breaking all the rules for. If you're ready to witness a love story that challenges everything you think you know about worth and worthiness, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from, because this journey will change how you see both love and courage forever. The morning light filtered through Eleanor Whitmore's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across her pristine marble floors. She stood at the kitchen island, iPhone pressed to her ear, watching the city wake up 32 floors below. Her coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago. "The numbers don't add up, Thomas," she said into the phone, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "Run them again." Eleanor had built her fortune carefully over the past decade. Property investments, smart acquisitions, calculated risks that always paid off. She prided herself on being 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Control wasn't just how she did business, it was who she was. "I'll have the full report by noon," Thomas Reed's voice crackled through the speaker. Her financial advisor had worked with her for 5 years, and she'd never heard him sound uncertain before. "But Eleanor, if what we're seeing is accurate..." "It won't be," she cut him off. "It can't be." After hanging up, Eleanor walked to her bathroom and stared at her reflection. 32 years old, shoulder-length blonde hair perfectly styled even at 7 in the morning, blue eyes that missed nothing. She wore a cream-colored silk blouse and tailored black pants, her armor for whatever the day might bring. But today felt different. Wrong. 20 miles across the city, Caleb Brooks knelt beside his 8-year-old daughter's bed, gently shaking her shoulder. "Time to get up, princess," he said softly. Lily's eyes opened slowly, and she smiled that sleepy smile that made his heart ache with love every single morning. Her hair stuck up in 12 different directions, and she had a crease on her cheek from her pillow. 5 more minutes?" she mumbled. "Same 5 minutes you asked for yesterday." Caleb laughed, kissing her forehead. "Come on. Pancakes are getting cold." Their apartment wasn't much, 2 bedrooms in a building that had seen better days, but it was theirs. Caleb had painted Lily's room purple because it was her favorite color. He'd hung glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling and built her a bookshelf from scratch. Every corner held something that mattered. Lily padded to the kitchen in her pajamas, climbing onto her chair at the small round table. Caleb had already cut her pancakes into perfect squares, the way she liked them. "Dad?" she said, pouring too much syrup on her plate. "Yeah, baby?" "Mrs. Rodriguez said her grandma is coming to visit today." "When is my grandma coming to visit?" The question hit Caleb like it did every time. Simple, innocent, and impossible to answer in a way that wouldn't hurt her. "Remember what we talked about? Sometimes families look different than other families, but we've got each other, and that's pretty special, right?" Lily nodded, satisfied for now. She was 8, but she was smart. Too smart sometimes. She saw things other kids missed, asked questions that cut straight to the heart of things. Caleb worked maintenance at the Meridian Tower, one of those glass buildings downtown where people wore suits and made decisions about money he'd never see. He'd been there 3 years, ever since Lily started school, and he needed steady hours. The pay was decent, the benefits were good, and most importantly, it was reliable. He liked the work. Fixing things made sense to him. When something was broken, you figured out why. You gathered the right tools and you made it work again. No politics, no games, just problems with clear solutions. "Can we read together tonight?" Lily asked, syrup on her chin. Of course. Which book? The one about the girl who talks to animals. Caleb smiled. Good choice. After dropping Lily off at school, Caleb drove to the Meridian Tower. The building stretched 40 stories into the Seattle sky, all glass and steel and important people. He parked in the employee garage and took the service elevator to the 28th floor, where the executive offices were. Rosa Alvarez, the building manager, met him at his workstation with a clipboard and her usual no-nonsense expression. Good morning, Caleb. We've got a full day. The air system on 32 is acting up again, and there's something wrong with the conference room projector on 28. I'll start with the air system, Caleb said, grabbing his tools. 32 is residential, right? Just one unit. Eleanor Whitmore's penthouse. She's been here since 7 this morning, so try to be quiet. Caleb had heard the name before. Eleanor Whitmore owned half the building and several others around the city. He'd never met her, but he'd seen her in passing. Tall, blonde, always walking fast like she was late for something important. The service elevator opened onto the 32nd floor, and Caleb found the access panel near the main hallway. The penthouse door was closed, but he could hear a woman's voice through it. She sounded upset. He opened the panel and started checking the connections. The problem was obvious. A loose wire that was causing the system to cycle on and off. Simple fix, 5-minute job. But as he worked, pieces of the conversation from the penthouse drifted into the hallway. 200 million exposure. Timing sequence error. Reputation will be destroyed. Caleb tried not to listen, but the words painted a picture. He'd heard similar conversations before, back when he worked construction, and the foreman would panic about project timelines and cost overruns. This sounded bigger, but the pattern was the same. Someone had made a mistake with timing. Numbers that should have aligned didn't. And now someone very rich was about to lose a lot of money. None of his business. Caleb finished the repair, tested the system, and packed up his tools. But as he walked toward the elevator, the penthouse door opened. Eleanor Whitmore stood there, still in her cream blouse but looking nothing like the composed woman he'd glimpsed before. Her hair was slightly messy, and there were stress lines around her eyes. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you the maintenance person?" "Yes, ma'am. Caleb Brooks. Just finished with your air system. Should be working fine now." She nodded absently, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. "Thank you." As the elevator doors started to close, Caleb made a decision he'd probably regret. "Ma'am?" The doors opened again. "I couldn't help but overhear. You mentioned something about timing sequences?" Eleanor's expression sharpened. "I'm sorry?" "I used to work construction, project management. Sometimes when numbers don't line up, it's because someone's measuring from the wrong starting point." For a moment, she just stared at him. Then something shifted in her face, desperation winning over pride. Would you mind explaining what you mean?" Caleb glanced at his watch. Rosa expected him to check on the projector downstairs, but this felt important. "May I?" He gestured toward the penthouse. Eleanor stepped aside, and Caleb walked into a space that took his breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, furniture that probably cost more than his annual salary, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in a museum. But none of that mattered when he saw the papers scattered across the dining table. Numbers, dates, calculations in neat columns, and in the middle of it all, the problem. "You're tracking from the wrong baseline," he said, pointing to a column of figures. "See here? This date sequence assumes everything starts from the same point. But your actual start dates are staggered." Eleanor moved closer, studying the papers. She smelled like expensive perfume and coffee. "I don't understand." "Think of it like building a house," Caleb said. "If you pour the foundation on Monday but don't start framing until Wednesday, your completion date can't assume everything started Monday. You've got to account for the gap. He pulled out a pen and started drawing simple diagrams on the back of one of the papers. If you adjust your baseline to account for the actual start sequence instead of the planned sequence. Eleanor watched his hands move across the paper, her expression changing from confusion to understanding to something that looked like amazement. The exposure disappears, she whispered. Should. Yeah. The money was always there. It was just hidden behind bad math. Eleanor stared at the corrected calculations, then at Caleb, then back at the papers. How did you see that? Caleb shrugged. I spend a lot of time fixing things that break because someone didn't line up the pieces right the first time. The penthouse door opened, and a man in an expensive suit walked in without knocking. He was maybe 40, with perfectly styled brown hair and the kind of confidence that came from never being wrong about anything. Eleanor, I've got the revised projections. He stopped when he saw Caleb. Who's this? Thomas. This is Caleb Brooks. He just solved our problem. Thomas looked from Eleanor to Caleb to the papers on the table, his expression going from confusion to disbelief to something that might have been embarrassment. I'm sorry. Solved what problem? Eleanor handed him the corrected calculations. The timing sequence. It wasn't an exposure at all. We were measuring from the wrong baseline. Thomas studied the papers for a long moment, his face growing redder with each second. How did you... Common mistake, Caleb said quietly. Happens all the time in construction when you're coordinating multiple timelines. Construction, Thomas repeated, like the word tasted bad. The silence stretched out until Caleb cleared his throat. I should get back to work. You've got other things that need fixing. Wait, Eleanor said. I don't know how to thank you. This would have been devastating. No thanks needed, Caleb said, already moving toward the door. Just glad I could help. But as he waited for the elevator, he could hear Thomas's voice through the penthouse door. Eleanor, you can't seriously trust financial advice from a maintenance worker. We need to verify this with actual experts. The elevator arrived, and Caleb stepped inside. As the doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of Eleanor standing by her windows, looking out at the city with an expression he couldn't quite read. Downstairs, Rosa was waiting by the conference room with her arms crossed. Everything okay up there? You were gone longer than usual. Yeah, Caleb said, picking up his toolbox. Just a loose wire. Let's check on that projector. But as he worked on the conference room equipment, Caleb couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor Whitmore. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, or because she was rich, though she obviously was. It was something else. The way she'd listened to him, really listened, like his words mattered. The way she'd looked at the solution he'd shown her, like he'd handed her something precious. Most people in buildings like this looked through him, not at him. They saw the uniform, the toolbox, the job, but not the person. Eleanor had seen the person, and that, Caleb realized, was more dangerous than any amount of money. That evening, Caleb picked up Lily from after-school care and drove home through the familiar streets of their neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, chain restaurants and strip malls and apartment complexes that all looked the same, but it was real. People worked hard here, took care of each other, knew their neighbors' names. How was school, Princess? Good. We learned about fractions. Mrs. Patterson says I'm really good at math. That's my girl. Math is important. Dad? Yeah? Do you like your job? The question surprised him. Why do you ask? Because Marcus's dad says his job is boring, and Sarah's mom always seems sad when she talks about work. But you never seem sad about work. Caleb thought about it as they pulled into their parking spot. I like fixing things, he said finally. When something's broken, I can make it work again. That feels good. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard. Lily nodded like this made perfect sense to her 8-year-old logic. I want a job like that someday, where I help people. That night, after Lily was asleep, Caleb sat on his small balcony with a beer and thought about the day. About Eleanor Whitmore and her penthouse and her impossible problem that turned out to have a simple solution. He thought about the way she'd looked at him when he explained about timing sequences, like he was smart, like what he had to say mattered. And he thought about Thomas, with his expensive suit and his skeptical expression, the kind of man who belonged in Eleanor's world, the kind of man who would never doubt his right to be there. Caleb had learned a long time ago to be careful about crossing lines. Rich people had rich friends, and poor people who forgot their place sometimes found themselves unemployed. He had Lily to think about now. Steady work, steady income, steady life. But tomorrow, he'd have to go back to the Meridian Tower. He'd probably see Eleanor Whitmore again, maybe in the elevator or the lobby. And he wasn't sure he could go back to being invisible. 28 floors up, Eleanor stood at her own windows, looking out at the same city lights. The papers on her dining table had been cleared away, replaced by a bottle of wine she hadn't opened, and a dinner she hadn't eaten. Thomas had spent 2 hours verifying Caleb's solution with 3 different financial experts. All of them confirmed what Caleb had seen in 5 minutes. The timing sequence adjustment worked. The exposure disappeared. The crisis was over. But instead of feeling relieved, Eleanor felt something she couldn't name. It had started when Caleb drew those simple diagrams on the back of her expensive financial projections. When he looked at her complicated problem and saw a simple solution. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Lunch tomorrow? I have news about the Richardsons' divorce settlement." Eleanor stared at the message without responding. Her mother lived in the same world Eleanor had always known. Charity galas and country club politics, and the endless, exhausting work of maintaining appearances. A world where problems were solved with money and connections and influence. A world where no one would believe that a maintenance worker had saved her company in 5 minutes. Eleanor walked to her kitchen and finally opened the wine. As she poured a glass, she found herself wondering about Caleb Brooks. Did he live nearby? Did he have family? What did he do when he wasn't fixing other people's problems? She realized she knew nothing about him except that he was observant, kind, and smarter than anyone in her boardroom, and that tomorrow she wanted to see him again. Eleanor woke up the next morning with an unfamiliar feeling in her chest. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about quarterly reports or investment strategies. She was thinking about a man with gentle hands who saw solutions where her experts saw disaster. She dressed more carefully than usual, a soft blue sweater instead of her usual blazer, jeans instead of dress pants. Not that she planned to see Caleb Brooks today. The building was huge. The chances of running into him were slim. But she found herself taking the elevator to the 28th floor instead of going straight to her penthouse office. "Good morning, Ms. Whitmore," Rosa Alvarez said, looking up from her desk with surprise. "Is everything okay with your apartment?" "Oh yes, everything's fine. I just wanted to thank the maintenance person who helped me yesterday. Caleb Brooks?" Rosa's expression shifted slightly. "Caleb's working on the 15th floor today. Heating issues." "I see." Eleanor felt foolish suddenly. "Well, if you see him, please tell him I appreciated his help." "I will." Rosa's voice was neutral, but her eyes were curious. Eleanor rode the elevator back up, embarrassed by her own transparency. What was wrong with her? She was acting like a teenager with a crush. But that evening, she found herself walking through the building lobby at exactly 6 o'clock, the time she'd noticed Caleb leaving the day before. She pretended to check her mail, key her mailbox with unnecessary attention. The service elevator opened, and Caleb emerged with his toolbox and jacket. Their eyes met across the marble lobby, and Eleanor's heart did something strange. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, walking over. "How did the numbers work out?" "Perfect," she said. "Your solution saved my company. I can't thank you enough." Caleb shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. Just glad it helped. They stood there for a moment, the space between them filled with everything Eleanor wanted to say and didn't know how to voice. Finally, Caleb glanced toward the parking garage. I should get going. My daughter's waiting. Daughter? The word slipped out before Eleanor could stop herself. Caleb's whole face changed when he smiled. Lily, she's 8. That's wonderful. Eleanor meant it, though she felt an unexpected pang at the thought of Caleb having a family. Of course he had a family. Good men like him always did. What about you? Caleb asked. Family? No, Eleanor said quickly. I mean, my mother lives here in the city, but no. No children. No husband. Caleb nodded, and Eleanor thought she saw something shift in his expression. But before she could analyze it, he was moving toward the garage. Have a good evening, Ms. Whitmore. Eleanor? She called after him. Please call me Eleanor. He turned back, surprised. Okay. Eleanor. The way he said her name made her stomach flutter like she was 16 again. The next few days fell into an unplanned pattern. Eleanor would find reasons to be in the lobby around 6 o'clock. Sometimes Caleb was there. Sometimes he wasn't. When he was, they'd exchange a few words about the weather or the building. Nothing deep, nothing personal. But Eleanor found herself looking forward to these brief encounters more than she looked forward to anything else. On Friday, she was in the elevator when it stopped on the 15th floor. Caleb stepped in with a young girl who had his same warm brown eyes and a backpack covered in rainbow stickers. Hi, the girl said to Eleanor with the fearless friendliness of childhood. I'm Lily. Hello, Lily. I'm Eleanor. Dad, is this your friend from work? Caleb looked embarrassed. Lily, remember what we talked about? People have their own business. It's okay, Eleanor said quickly. And yes, your dad helped me with something important at work. Dad's really good at fixing things, Lily said proudly. He fixed my bike last week when the chain came off, and he built my bookshelf all by himself. That's wonderful, Eleanor said, charmed by the girl's enthusiasm. The elevator stopped at the 20th floor. Eleanor's stop for the parking garage. As she stepped out, Lily waved. Bye, Eleanor. It was nice meeting you. Eleanor waved back, her chest tight with an emotion she couldn't name. As the elevator doors closed, she caught Caleb's eye. He looked worried, like he was afraid she'd judge him for bringing his daughter to work. Instead, Eleanor found herself smiling all the way to her car. That weekend, Eleanor did something she hadn't done in years. She went to a regular coffee shop instead of the exclusive cafe she usually frequented. She told herself it was because she wanted to experience how normal people lived. But really, she was hoping to understand Caleb's world better. The coffee shop was busy and loud, filled with families and couples and people working on laptops. Eleanor ordered a simple coffee and found a seat by the window, watching the flow of everyday life. At the next table, a man was helping his young son with math homework. The problems were simple: addition and subtraction. But the father was patient, explaining each step with the same care she'd seen Caleb use to fix her timing sequence. Dad, I don't get it, the boy said, frustrated. That's okay, the father said. Let's try a different way. Eleanor thought about her own childhood. Private tutors, expensive schools, parents who hired other people to help with homework because they were too busy with social obligations. She'd never struggled with math, but she'd also never had anyone sit with her and patiently work through problems. She thought about Caleb and Lily, imagining them at their kitchen table, working through fractions together. The image made her chest ache with longing for something she'd never known she wanted. Monday morning brought unexpected complications. Eleanor arrived at her penthouse to find Thomas waiting with coffee and a stack of contracts. Good news, he said. The Richardson deal is back on track thanks to your crisis resolution last week. They're impressed with our problem-solving capabilities. Eleanor nodded absently, signing documents without really reading them. Her mind was elsewhere, specifically wondering if Caleb was working in the building today. "Eleanor, are you listening? This is a $40 million deal." "Sorry, yes." "The Richardson deal." "That's great." Thomas frowned. "You've been distracted lately. Everything okay?" "Fine, just tired." But Eleanor wasn't tired. She was restless. Her usual routines felt hollow. Her usual concerns seemed trivial. She kept thinking about Lily's bright smile, and Caleb's quiet competence, and the way he'd looked at her complex financial problem and seen a simple human solution. That afternoon, her mother called. "Lunch tomorrow?" Margaret Whitmore's voice carried the authority of someone who expected to be accommodated. "The country club is hosting that charity luncheon for the children's hospital." "I can't, Mother. I have meetings." "Eleanor, this is important. The Harrisons will be there, and they're considering selling their downtown property. This could be a valuable connection." Eleanor closed her eyes. This was her life. Endless networking, strategic relationships, conversations about money disguised as social interactions. "I'll try to move things around," she said finally. "Good. And Eleanor, wear the navy dress with the pearls. You look successful in navy." After hanging up, Eleanor stood at her windows, looking down at the city. Somewhere down there, Caleb was probably picking up Lily from school, asking about her day, helping with homework, living a life that was real and immediate and grounded in love instead of strategy. Eleanor made a decision. She found Rosa in the building management office, reviewing work orders. "Ms. Whitmore," Rosa said, looking up. "What can I help you with?" "I was wondering, is there anything in my unit that needs maintenance? Anything at all?" Rosa studied her suspiciously. "Your unit is in perfect condition. We just did the quarterly inspection last month." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Right, of course. Is there something specific you need?" Eleanor scrambled for an excuse. "The bathroom faucet has been dripping a little." "Just slightly." "I'll send someone up this afternoon," Rosa said, making a note. "Shouldn't take long to fix." Eleanor nodded and fled to the elevator, mortified by her own transparency. But 3 hours later, when her doorbell rang, her heart still jumped with hope. It wasn't Caleb. It was a younger man she'd never seen before, with a toolbox and a confused expression. "Ms. Whitmore, I'm here about the faucet." Eleanor led him to the bathroom, where the faucet was working perfectly. The maintenance worker checked all the connections, tested the water pressure, and found nothing wrong. "Everything looks good," he said. "No drips, no leaks. Are you sure there was a problem?" Maybe I was mistaken," Eleanor said weakly. After he left, Eleanor sat on her couch and faced the uncomfortable truth. She was a successful, intelligent, independent woman who was engineering fake maintenance requests to see a man she barely knew. This had to stop. But that evening, when the elevator opened on the lobby level and she saw Caleb walking toward the parking garage, all her rational thoughts disappeared. "Caleb," she called before she could stop herself. He turned, and his face lit up in a way that made Eleanor's knees weak. "Eleanor, how's everything going?" "Good, fine." She walked toward him, her heart pounding. "I was wondering, would you like to get coffee sometime? To thank you properly for your help?" Caleb's expression became guarded. "That's not necessary." "I know it's not necessary. I'd like to." They stood there in the lobby, the space between them charged with possibility and uncertainty. Finally, Caleb spoke. "I don't think that's a good idea." The words hit Eleanor like cold water. "Oh, of course. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's not that I don't want to," Caleb said quickly. "It's just, we live in different worlds, Eleanor. You and me. So people in your world don't usually be friends with people in mine." Eleanor felt a flash of anger. "You don't know anything about my world." I know enough, Caleb said quietly. I've worked in buildings like this for years. I know how these things go. How what things go? Caleb looked at her for a long moment, something sad in his eyes. Rich white women don't date black maintenance workers, Eleanor. Not in the real world. The words hung between them, honest and painful. Eleanor felt like she'd been slapped, not because what he said was cruel, but because it was true. Not true for her. She didn't care about race or money or status, but true for the world she'd grown up in. The world her mother lived in. The world that would judge them both if they crossed that line. I'm not most people, she said finally. Maybe not, Caleb said. But I've got Lily to think about. I can't take chances with my job, my life. I can't afford to be wrong about people. Eleanor understood then. It wasn't just about her. It was about protection, about survival, about a man who'd learned to be careful because carelessness could cost him everything. I understand, she said softly. Caleb nodded, but he didn't look relieved. He looked tired. I should go, he said. Lily's got a math test tomorrow. Eleanor watched him walk away, her heart breaking for reasons she couldn't fully name. Not just because he'd said no, but because he'd had to say no. Because the world had taught him to be afraid of taking chances on people like her. She rode the elevator back to her penthouse, past the floors where other people lived normal lives, past the offices where other people did work that mattered to them, all the way to her empty apartment, with its perfect furniture, and its view of the city that suddenly felt like a view from prison. That night, Eleanor called her mother back. I'll come to lunch tomorrow, she said, and I'll wear the navy dress. Wonderful, Margaret said. You won't regret it, darling. The right connections can change everything. After hanging up, Eleanor poured herself a glass of wine and stood at her windows, looking out at the lights of the city. Somewhere out there, Caleb was probably helping Lily with her math homework, being the kind of father Eleanor had never had. And tomorrow, Eleanor would put on her navy dress and her pearls, and smile at the right people, and have the right conversations, and pretend that her heart wasn't breaking for something she'd never even had the chance to lose. Because that's what people in her world did. They followed the rules, even when the rules were killing them slowly from the inside out. But as she stood there, looking out at the city lights, Eleanor made herself a promise. She didn't know how or when, but she was going to find a way to show Caleb Brooks that some people were worth taking chances on, even if it meant risking everything she'd built to prove it. The charity luncheon at the country club was exactly what Eleanor expected. Crystal glasses, forced smiles, and conversations that danced around money without ever mentioning it directly. She sat at a table with her mother and the Harrisons, wearing her navy dress and pearl necklace, playing her part perfectly. Eleanor, dear, Mrs. Harrison said, cutting into her salmon. Margaret tells me you've been doing wonderful things with property development. Some interesting projects, Eleanor replied, taking a sip of water. Her mind kept drifting to Caleb and Lily, wondering what they were having for lunch. Probably something simple and real, eaten at their little kitchen table. The downtown market is so unpredictable right now, Mr. Harrison continued. We're thinking of selling our building on Fifth Avenue, but we want to make sure it goes to the right kind of buyer. Margaret leaned forward eagerly. Eleanor would be very interested in hearing more about that property. Eleanor nodded and smiled, but inside she felt hollow. This was her life. Strategic conversations, calculated friendships, relationships built on what people could do for each other rather than who they were. Excuse me, she said suddenly, standing up. I need to make a phone call. In the country club bathroom, Eleanor stared at herself in the ornate mirror. The woman looking back at her was polished, successful, untouchable. Everything she'd worked to become. But she looked like a stranger. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. How's lunch going? Any progress with the Harrisons? She deleted the message without responding. That afternoon, Eleanor returned to the Meridian Tower feeling more disconnected than ever. She rode the elevator to her penthouse, but instead of going inside, she found herself taking the stairs down one floor, then another, and another. She wasn't sure what she was looking for until she reached the 15th floor and heard familiar voices coming from a maintenance room. "Hold this steady while I tighten the connection." "Like this, Dad?" Eleanor's heart jumped. Through the half-open door, she could see Caleb working on an electrical panel while Lily held a flashlight for him. "Perfect. You're a great helper, Princess. Can I learn to fix things like you do?" "If you want to. But you're smart enough to be anything you want to be. Doctor, teacher, engineer, anything." "What if I want to fix things?" Caleb paused in his work and looked at his daughter seriously. "Then you'd be the best thing fixer in the world. But remember, there's lots of different kinds of fixing. Some people fix machines. Some people fix problems. Some people fix hearts." Eleanor's throat tightened. She started to back away, not wanting to intrude on their private moment, but her movement caught Lily's attention. "Dad, look. It's Eleanor." Caleb turned, surprise and something else crossing his face when he saw her. "Eleanor, what are you doing down here?" "I was just—" Eleanor scrambled for an explanation. "Walking. Thinking." "In the stairwell?" Lily asked with 8-year-old logic. Eleanor laughed despite herself. "I guess that does sound strange." "Want to see what we're fixing?" Lily asked brightly. "Dad's teaching me about electrical stuff." "Lily," Caleb warned gently. "It's okay," Eleanor said quickly. "I'd love to see." Lily beamed and launched into an explanation of circuits and connections that was part accurate and part wonderfully creative. Eleanor listened with genuine interest, charmed by the girl's enthusiasm and impressed by how much she'd absorbed from watching her father work. "And then the electricity goes whoosh through the wires and makes the lights work," Lily finished triumphantly. "That's amazing," Eleanor said. "You're very smart." "Dad says I get that from him," Lily said proudly. Eleanor looked at Caleb, who was watching his daughter with an expression of pure love. "He's right." After Lily exhausted her explanation of electrical systems, she moved on to other topics with the rapid-fire curiosity of childhood. "Eleanor, do you have any kids?" "No, I don't." "Why not?" "Lily," Caleb said more firmly. "It's okay," Eleanor said. "I just haven't found the right person to have kids with." "My mom's in heaven," Lily said matter-of-factly. "She went there when I was little, but Dad takes really good care of me." Eleanor's heart clenched. She looked at Caleb, who was focused intently on the electrical panel, his jaw tight. "I'm sure he does," Eleanor said softly. "You're very lucky to have such a good dad." "I know," Lily said simply. "Eleanor, do you want to have dinner with us sometime? Dad makes really good spaghetti." The invitation hung in the air like a bridge between two worlds. Eleanor looked at Caleb, whose hands had stilled on his tools. "That's very kind of you, Lily, but your dad and I—" "Actually," Caleb said quietly, not looking up from his work, "that might be nice, if you'd like." Eleanor felt her heart stop. "Are you sure?" Caleb finally met her eyes. "Lily's a good judge of people, and I figure, what's the harm in dinner?" That evening, Eleanor stood outside a small apartment building 20 minutes from downtown, holding a bottle of wine that probably cost more than most people's grocery budget. She'd changed out of her navy dress into jeans and a simple sweater, but she still felt overdressed for this neighborhood. The building was old, but well-maintained, with flower boxes in some of the windows and children's bikes chained to the front porch railings. It looked like the kind of place where people knew their neighbors' names. Caleb answered the door in jeans and a gray t-shirt, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "Come on up," he said. "Fair warning, it's not fancy." Eleanor followed him up 2 flights of stairs to apartment 3B. The moment he opened the door, she was hit with the smell of garlic and tomatoes and something indefinably warm. "Welcome to our palace," Caleb said with a self-deprecating smile. Eleanor stepped inside and fell in love immediately. The apartment was small but spotless, filled with mismatched furniture that somehow worked perfectly together. Lily's artwork covered the refrigerator, and bookshelves lined one wall, crammed with everything from children's stories to technical manuals to worn paperback novels. "Eleanor!" Lily bounced over wearing a purple dress and fuzzy slippers. "You came!" "Thank you for inviting me," Eleanor said, handing Caleb the wine. "I hope this is okay." Caleb looked at the label and raised an eyebrow. "This is more than okay. This is... wow. I didn't know what you liked." "Lily, can you show Eleanor around while I finish dinner?" Caleb asked. Lily grabbed Eleanor's hand and launched into a comprehensive tour. "This is our living room. Dad built that bookshelf himself. And this is my room. I picked the purple paint. And this is Dad's room, but we're not supposed to go in there unless it's an emergency." The apartment was tiny, but felt enormous with love. Every surface held something that mattered. Photos, drawings, little treasures that spoke of a life lived intentionally. Eleanor's penthouse was 10 times the size, but felt cold and empty by comparison. "And this is our kitchen," Lily announced proudly. "Dad's making his famous spaghetti." Caleb stood at the small stove, stirring sauce in a pot that had seen better days. The kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people, but it smelled like heaven. "Can I help?" Eleanor asked. "You can sit," Caleb said. "You're the guest." "I'd rather help, if that's okay." Caleb hesitated, then handed her a wooden spoon. "Stir this while I get the pasta water ready." They worked together in the small space, their shoulders bumping occasionally as they moved around each other. Eleanor had cooked in her state-of-the-art kitchen maybe 6 times since moving into the penthouse. But here, stirring sauce while Caleb boiled pasta and Lily set their small table with mismatched plates, she felt more at home than she had in years. "Dad, tell Eleanor about your sauce," Lily said. "It's not that special," Caleb said, but Eleanor could see he was pleased. "He learned it from his grandma," Lily explained. "She taught him all kinds of cooking when he was little." "My grandmother raised me," Caleb said quietly. "After my parents died in a car accident. She said a man who couldn't feed himself couldn't take care of anyone else." "She sounds wonderful," Eleanor said. "She was. Died 2 years ago, but she got to meet Lily. That meant everything to me." Eleanor heard the story behind the story. A boy who lost his parents, a young man who learned to be self-sufficient, a father raising his daughter alone after another loss. So much strength built on so much pain. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Life happens," Caleb said with a shrug. "The important thing is what you do with it." Dinner was the best meal Eleanor had eaten in months. Not because the food was fancy, it wasn't, but because it was made with care and eaten with laughter. Lily entertained them with stories from school. Caleb teased his daughter gently about her elaborate plans to become a veterinarian astronaut artist, and Eleanor found herself relaxing in a way she'd forgotten was possible. "Eleanor, do you have any brothers or sisters?" Lily asked between bites of spaghetti. "No, just me." "That must have been lonely." Eleanor paused, surprised by the child's insight. "Sometimes it was. I get lonely sometimes too, even though I have Dad. But Dad says it's okay to feel lonely sometimes. It just means you care about people." Eleanor looked at Caleb, who was watching his daughter with pride and something else, a deep tenderness that made Eleanor's chest ache. After dinner, they sat on the small couch while Lily read to them from her current favorite book. The little girl curled up between Eleanor and Caleb, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of the story. Eleanor found herself watching Caleb more than listening to the story. The way he brushed Lily's hair back from her face. The way he laughed at the funny parts like he was hearing them for the first time. The way he looked completely content in this small apartment with his daughter, and a woman he barely knew. When Lily started yawning, Caleb scooped her up. "Bedtime, princess." "But Eleanor's here," Lily protested sleepily. "Eleanor will still be here when you wake up," Caleb said. Then he caught himself, looking at Eleanor uncertainly. "I mean, if you want to stay a little longer." "I'd like that," Eleanor said softly. Caleb carried Lily to her room, and Eleanor could hear their bedtime routine through the thin walls, teeth brushing, story reading, gentle conversation. It was intimate in a way that made Eleanor feel like she was glimpsing something sacred. When Caleb returned, they sat on opposite ends of the small couch, the space between them somehow both vast and intimate. "Thank you," Eleanor said. "For dinner. For this." "Lily likes you," Caleb said simply. "She doesn't warm up to people easily. She's amazing. You're doing an incredible job with her." Caleb looked down at his hands. "Some days I wonder if I'm enough. If she needs..." "What?" "A mother. A woman's perspective. I try, but..." "She needs love," Eleanor said firmly. "And it's obvious she has that. Everything else is just details." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the building settling around them. Somewhere down the hall, someone was watching television. Upstairs, footsteps moved across the floor. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said. "Sure." "What happened with Lily's mother?" Caleb was quiet for so long, Eleanor thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he spoke. "Maria was my girlfriend in college. We were young, thought we had everything figured out. When she got pregnant, we tried to make it work, but..." He shrugged. "We wanted different things. She wanted to travel, see the world. I wanted stability, family. After Lily was born, Maria tried to be what she thought a mother should be, but she was miserable." "What happened?" "She left when Lily was 6 months old. Said she'd come back when she figured herself out." Caleb's voice was matter of fact, but Eleanor could hear the old pain underneath. "She died in a climbing accident in Peru 2 years later. Never made it back." "I'm sorry. Don't be. Maria wasn't a bad person. She just wasn't meant to be a mother. And honestly, Lily and I are better off. We've got each other, and that's enough." Eleanor studied his profile in the dim lamplight. "Doesn't it get lonely?" Caleb turned to look at her. "Sometimes. But I learned a long time ago that being alone is better than being with the wrong person." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. Eleanor thought about her own loneliness, rattling around her empty penthouse, going to charity luncheons with people she didn't like, living a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow within. "What about you?" Caleb asked. "Ever been close?" "To marriage, once, a few years ago." Eleanor picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion. "Richard Ashford. He was everything my mother thought I should want. Wealthy, connected, from the right family." "What happened?" Eleanor smiled ruefully. "I realized he didn't actually like me very much. He liked the idea of me, the package I represented. But the actual person? He thought I was too independent, too opinionated. He wanted a wife who would look good at dinner parties and not ask too many questions about anything important." Sounds awful. It was. But the worst part was that I almost settled for it. I almost married him because it was easier than admitting my life wasn't working. Caleb reached across the couch and touched her hand briefly. "I'm glad you didn't." The simple contact sent electricity through Eleanor's entire body. She looked at their hands, his dark and strong and practical, hers pale and soft, and adorned with expensive rings that suddenly seemed ridiculous. "Caleb," she said softly. "Yeah? I know you think we're from different worlds, and maybe we are. But sitting here tonight, This feels more real than anything in my life has felt in years. Caleb didn't pull his hand away, but Eleanor could see the war playing out in his expression. Want battling with caution, hope fighting with experience. Eleanor, he said finally, I need you to understand something. I can't afford to get this wrong. If I lose my job, if people start talking, Lily depends on me for everything. I can't take risks with her security. I know, Eleanor said, and I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking. Can we try? Can we see where this goes? Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. One step at a time? He asked. One step at a time, Eleanor agreed. He smiled then, and Eleanor felt like she could breathe for the first time in weeks. I should probably go, she said reluctantly. It's getting late. Caleb walked her to the door, and they stood there for a moment in the small entryway, neither quite ready to end the evening. Thank you, Eleanor said again, for letting me in, both of you. Thank you for coming, for seeing us. Eleanor reached up and touched his face gently. He leaned into her palm, closing his eyes. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Eleanor. As Eleanor drove home through the quiet streets, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the calculated optimism of a good business deal, but real, vulnerable, terrifying hope. She thought about Lily's laughter and Caleb's gentle hands, and the way it felt to be part of something real and immediate, and grounded in love rather than strategy. And for the first time since she could remember, Eleanor couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. But as she pulled into the underground garage of the Meridian Tower, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. How did lunch go with the Harrisons? When can we set up a proper meeting about their property? Reality came crashing back. Her mother's world, Thomas's expectations, the life she'd built, the image she maintained, the careful balance of relationships and obligations that kept her business empire running. Eleanor stared at the text for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. One step at a time, she told herself. But as she rode the elevator up to her empty penthouse, she wondered if some worlds were simply too far apart to bridge, even for love. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor discovered what it meant to live between two worlds. During the day, she attended board meetings and reviewed investment portfolios. She met with contractors about her latest property development and had lunch with potential investors. To everyone around her, she was the same Eleanor Whitmore, composed, successful, untouchable. But her evenings belonged to Caleb and Lily. It started slowly, dinner once a week, then twice. Eleanor would bring groceries and Caleb would cook, or they'd order pizza and let Lily pick the movie. Eleanor learned that Lily was fascinated by space travel, that she could recite the names of all the planets in order, and that she had nightmares sometimes about losing her father the way she'd lost her mother. She's been better lately, Caleb told Eleanor one evening as they cleaned dishes while Lily worked on homework at the kitchen table. The nightmares, I mean. She seems happier. She's an amazing kid, Eleanor said, watching Lily carefully color in a map of the United States. You both are. Caleb bumped her shoulder gently. You're not so bad yourself. These small moments of contact had become precious to Eleanor. A hand on her back as Caleb reached around her for a dish, their fingers brushing when they both reached for something at the same time. Nothing dramatic, but each touch felt electric. Eleanor was falling in love, and she knew it. Not just with Caleb, though watching him read bedtime stories to Lily, in voices for all the characters, made her heart ache with tenderness. She was falling in love with their life, the easy intimacy, the genuine care, the way they made room for her without question. But keeping their relationship secret was becoming harder every day. You've been different lately, Thomas observed one Tuesday morning as they reviewed quarterly projections. Happier. Did something good happen? Just feeling optimistic about the market, Eleanor said, not meeting his eyes. Thomas seemed unconvinced. Well, whatever it is, keep it up. You've been making better decisions lately, more creative solutions. Eleanor thought about Caleb's approach to problems, looking for simple answers to complex questions, focusing on what worked rather than what looked impressive. His influence was changing how she thought about everything. That evening, Eleanor arrived at Caleb's apartment to find him stressed and distracted. Lily was at a sleepover with a friend from school, and Caleb had papers spread across the kitchen table. "What's wrong?" Eleanor asked, setting down the Thai food she'd brought. "Nothing, just work stuff." But Caleb's jaw was tight, and he kept running his hands through his hair. "Talk to me." Caleb sighed. The building management company is restructuring. They're talking about cutting maintenance staff, outsourcing some of the work. Eleanor felt her stomach drop. "Your job?" "I don't know. Maybe. They say it's about efficiency, cost savings." Caleb's voice was carefully controlled. "Rosa's been good to me, but she doesn't make the decisions." Eleanor's mind immediately jumped to solutions. She could call the building's ownership company, use her influence as a major tenant. She could recommend Caleb for other positions, write references, make calls. But she caught herself. This wasn't her crisis to solve. And more importantly, Caleb hadn't asked for her help. "What will you do?" she asked instead. "What I always do. Work hard, hope for the best, have backup plans." Caleb gathered the papers into a neat stack. "I've got some money saved. Lily and I will be okay." "I know you will," Eleanor said, meaning it. Caleb was one of the most capable people she'd ever met. But the thought of him losing his job, of the uncertainty that would bring to his and Lily's lives, made her chest tight with worry. They ate dinner quietly, both lost in thought. Eleanor wanted to comfort him, to promise that everything would be fine, but she sensed that Caleb needed space to process his anxiety in his own way. Later, as they sat on the couch watching a mindless action movie, Eleanor curled up against Caleb's side. He wrapped his arm around her, and she felt some of the tension leave his body. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For being here. For not trying to fix everything." Eleanor tilted her head to look at him. "Is that what you thought I'd do?" "Maybe. You're used to solving problems with money and connections. I was afraid you'd try to swoop in and rescue me." "Do you want me to?" Caleb considered this seriously. "Part of me does, but a bigger part of me needs to handle this myself. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Eleanor said, though it killed her to sit back and watch him worry when she had the power to help. They kissed for the first time that night. It started gentle and tentative, but deepened quickly into something that made Eleanor's entire body come alive. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably take you home," he said. "Probably," Eleanor agreed, but neither of them moved. "Eleanor?" "Yeah?" "I'm falling in love with you." And the words hit her like a physical force. "I'm falling in love with you too." They kissed again, and Eleanor felt like she was finally, truly home. But the real world had a way of intruding on even the most perfect moments. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the Meridian Tower to find her mother waiting in the lobby. Margaret Whitmore stood near the concierge desk like she owned the place, which Eleanor realized she partially did. "Mother." Eleanor's heart sank. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see your office. You've been so busy lately we barely talk." "I've been working." "I'm sure you have." Margaret's sharp eyes took in Eleanor's casual dress, the flush in her cheeks, the way she kept glancing toward the service elevator. "Though you look more like you've been playing." They rode up to Eleanor's penthouse in tense silence. Margaret walked through the apartment with the critical eye of someone who had opinions about everything. It's lovely, dear, but don't you think it's a bit isolated up here? You need to be around people your own age, your own background. I'm around people all the time. Business people don't count. I'm talking about social connections, real relationships. Margaret settled into one of Eleanor's expensive chairs. Speaking of which, I ran into Catherine Morrison at the gallery last week. Her son James just returned from London. He's starting his own investment firm. Eleanor's stomach clenched. Mother, he's very handsome, very successful, and he specifically asked about you. I'm not interested in meeting James Morrison. Margaret's eyes sharpened. Why not? Eleanor, you're 32 years old. If you want children, you can't wait forever. And James comes from excellent family. I don't care about his family. You should. Eleanor, I worry about you up here alone, making decisions without consulting anyone. You're becoming eccentric. Eleanor felt a flash of anger. Eccentric? Isolated, disconnected from your own social circle. When's the last time you attended a proper social function? When's the last time you dated someone suitable? Suitable according to whom? According to reality, Eleanor. You have a position to maintain, a reputation to protect. These things matter in our world. Eleanor stood up abruptly. What if I don't want to be in our world anymore? Margaret blinked, clearly shocked. Don't be ridiculous. I'm serious. What if I want something different, something real? Eleanor, you're talking nonsense. This is your life. This is who you are. No, Eleanor said quietly. This is who you taught me to be, but maybe I want to be someone else. Margaret stood up as well, her face flushed with anger and concern. Eleanor Whitmore, you are my daughter. You have responsibilities, obligations. You can't just throw away everything your father and I built because you're having some sort of midlife crisis. I'm 32. Then stop acting like a teenager. Start thinking about your future, about legacy, about what you want instead of what I want. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and final. Margaret's face went pale, then hard. I want what's best for you, she said stiffly. I always have. No, Eleanor said sadly. You want what looks best. There's a difference. Margaret gathered her purse and stood. I can see you need time to think. But Eleanor, remember, when you tear down everything you've built, you can't always put it back together again. After her mother left, Eleanor sat in her perfect apartment and felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. For the first time since she'd started seeing Caleb, she allowed herself to really think about what a relationship with him would mean. The social consequences, the business implications, the way people in her world would look at them, talk about them, the way her mother would never accept him, never accept their relationship. Eleanor's phone rang. Thomas. Eleanor, we need to talk. There are some concerns about your recent associations. Eleanor's blood went cold. What do you mean? Perhaps we should discuss this in person. Can you come to my office? An hour later, Eleanor sat across from Thomas in his sleek downtown office, her hands folded carefully in her lap. Eleanor, you know I care about you, Thomas began. We've worked together for years. That's why I feel obligated to share some information that's come to my attention. What information? You've been seen. With the maintenance worker from your building. Multiple times. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. So? So people are talking. The wrong kind of people are starting to ask questions about your judgment, your decision-making ability. Based on what? Based on the fact that you're dating the help, Eleanor. Thomas's voice was sharp with frustration. Do you understand how that looks? Do you understand what kind of message that sends to your investors, your business partners? Eleanor stood up slowly. Are you asking me to stop seeing Caleb? I'm asking you to think. Really think about what you're risking here. Your reputation, your business relationships, your position in the community. For what? A fling with someone who... Someone who what? Eleanor's voice was dangerous now. Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. Someone who doesn't belong in your world. Get out, Eleanor said quietly. Eleanor, get out of your office. I'm leaving. Eleanor picked up her purse. And Thomas, you're fired. You can't be serious. I'm perfectly serious. Clean out your desk. I'll have someone else handle the transition. Eleanor walked out of Thomas's office with her head high and her heart breaking. Not because she regretted her choice, but because she finally understood the true cost of choosing love over status. By the time she reached her car, her phone was buzzing with messages. News traveled fast in their small, insular world. By the end of the day, Eleanor knew. Everyone would be talking about her dramatic exit from Thomas's office, her inappropriate relationship, her apparent breakdown. Eleanor drove aimlessly through the city, trying to process what had just happened. She'd burned a major bridge, damaged important relationships, put her business reputation at risk, and she wasn't sure she cared. That evening, Eleanor showed up at Caleb's apartment without calling first. She'd never done that before, but she needed to see him, needed the grounding presence of his calm certainty. Caleb opened the door and immediately knew something was wrong. Eleanor? What happened? Everything, she said and started crying. Caleb pulled her inside and held her while she told him about her mother's visit. Thomas's ultimatum, the choice she'd made, and the consequences she was already facing. I fired him, she said through her tears. I actually fired Thomas. Good, Caleb said firmly. Anyone who talks about you like that doesn't deserve to work for you. But he wasn't wrong about the consequences. People are talking. My business relationships are going to suffer. My mother will probably never speak to me again. Caleb pulled back to look at her. Eleanor, are you regretting this? Us? No, she said immediately. Never. But I'm scared. I've never chosen something that mattered more than status, more than approval. I don't know how to live without those things. Yes, you do, Caleb said gently. You've been doing it for weeks. Here, with me and Lily. That's not status talking when you help her with homework or listen to her stories about school. That's not approval seeking when you wash dishes or fold laundry. That's just love. Eleanor looked around the small apartment, at Lily's drawings on the refrigerator, at the mismatched furniture that somehow felt more elegant than anything in her penthouse, at the life she'd been building quietly with this man and his daughter. What if I lose everything? She whispered. Then we'll figure it out together, Caleb said. But Eleanor, you won't lose everything. You'll just lose the things that don't matter. The real stuff, the stuff that counts, that stays. Lily emerged from her bedroom in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Eleanor, are you okay? You look sad. Eleanor knelt down to Lily's level. I'm okay, sweetheart. Just having a hard day. Dad says hard days make you appreciate good days more, Lily said seriously. And he says people who love you will love you even on hard days. Eleanor looked up at Caleb, who was watching them with an expression that made her heart ache with love and gratitude. Your dad is very smart, Eleanor said. I know, Lily said matter-of-factly. Do you want to read stories with us? Reading always makes me feel better. And so Eleanor found herself curled up on the small couch between Caleb and Lily, reading about brave princesses and talking animals and adventures in faraway lands. And slowly, the knot of fear in her chest began to loosen. This was real. This was what mattered. This was worth fighting for. Later, after Lily was asleep, Eleanor and Caleb sat on the couch talking quietly about the future. I want to make this work, Eleanor said. Really work. Not hiding, not secret dinners. I want us to be real. That means people will judge us, Caleb said. Both of us. They'll say things. Let them talk, Eleanor said fiercely. I spent my whole life worried about what other people thought. I'm done with that. Caleb smiled and pulled her closer. Lily's going to be so excited. She's been asking when you're going to be her real mom instead of just Dad's friend. Eleanor's heart stopped. She said that? Last week. She told me she loves you and she thinks you love us too. And she doesn't understand why grown-ups make everything so complicated. Eleanor laughed through fresh tears. She's right. We do make everything too complicated. So we'll make it simple, Caleb said. We love each other. We're building something good together. Everything else is just noise. 3 months later, Eleanor stood in the lobby of the Meridian Tower with a realtor, signing the papers to sell her penthouse. She was moving to a house in Caleb's neighborhood, nothing fancy, but with a yard for Lily and a garage where Caleb could work on projects and enough space for all of them to build a life together. Rosa approached them as Eleanor finished the paperwork. Ms. Whitmore, I wanted to thank you. For what? For the recommendation letter you wrote for Caleb. The new property management company hired him as their head maintenance supervisor. The pay increase will make a big difference for his family. Eleanor smiled. He deserved it. He's the best at what he does. Yes, Rosa said with a knowing look. He is. As Eleanor loaded the last of her boxes into her car, she thought about the conversation she'd had with her mother the week before. Margaret had called, finally, after months of silence. I don't understand your choices, she'd said, but you seem happy, genuinely happy. I am, Mom, really happy. And this man, Caleb, he treats you well? Better than well. He sees me, the real me, not the version I thought I was supposed to be. Margaret had been quiet for a long moment. Perhaps I could meet him sometime. And his daughter. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. That evening, Eleanor sat on the front porch of her new house, watching Caleb teach Lily how to change a tire on her bike. The house was smaller than her penthouse. The neighborhood was quieter than downtown, and her new life looked nothing like the one she'd carefully constructed over the past decade. But as Lily ran over to show off her newly repaired bike, and Caleb sat down beside her with grease on his hands and love in his eyes, Eleanor knew she had made the right choice. Any regrets? Caleb asked softly. Eleanor looked around at their small yard, their modest house, their beautifully ordinary life, and smiled. Not a single one. Lily crashed into them both, demanding a group hug, and Eleanor wrapped her arms around the two people who had taught her the difference between having everything and having what mattered. I love you both, she said. We love you too, Lily said immediately. Forever, Caleb added, kissing Eleanor's temple. Eleanor closed her eyes and let herself sink into the warmth of their embrace. She had chosen love over status, reality over appearances, a small life full of meaning over a big life empty of connection. And it was the best decision she had ever made. As the sun set over their neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Eleanor finally understood what true wealth looked like. It wasn't measured in dollars or square footage or social connections. It was measured in moments like this. Quiet, ordinary, perfect moments when love was enough to fill all the empty spaces in your heart. And Eleanor Whitmore had never been richer.